Hi everyone from Allara and Clifton again. This is our second study on the first epistle of Peter. We're going through this letter together to see what Peter has to offer us in our present situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Last week I began by introducing the book and its themes. So Peter is writing to Christians facing persecution, and he writes to them encouraging them by reminding them that they are part of the new family of God. He encourages them to see their suffering as an opportunity to witness, and by encouraging them to look forward to Jesus' second coming, where all things will be restored and made new. This week we're going to begin by looking at the first two sections of the letter. So there's chapter 1, verses 1 to 2, just Peter's greeting, just an introduction, and then verses 3 to 12, which is a doxology or a hymn of praise. So let's begin with verse 1. So Peter begins with a greeting standard to letters at the time. It begins with his name and his title, Peter, an apostle of Jesus. And then he names the recipients. We talked a bit about them last week, where they lived and what they were going through. But today we want to notice the way that Peter describes these Christians. He uses some interesting phrases, calling them exiles of the dispersion, and also saying that they're chosen and destined. So with this language, Peter is already drawing the minds of his listeners into a sense that they are fully participating in the story of God's people. This phrase, exiles, or you might say foreigners of the dispersion, does a few things. It reminds them that they are part of the people of God, set apart from the world, but still in it, which is why they're foreigners. And then this, with the phrase chosen and destined, would likely draw their minds to the life of Abraham. You see, he was chosen out of his people to become a foreigner, waiting for God to bring him home to the promised land. Now, this, in Peter's writing, is a reminder for all of us that we're part of this great big family with Abraham, with Peter, and the original Christians who read this letter first, and that we're drawn together by God through the gospel. After this, beginning in verse 3, Peter breaks out into this sort of hymn of praise, which again covers the main themes of the epistle. The themes that we should be reminded of the great hope we have as the people of God, that we should see our suffering as an opportunity to bear witness, and that we are reminded of our final salvation, that when Jesus returns, this has been part of God's plan from the beginning. We looked a bit at verse 3 last week about how the resurrection of Jesus is the demonstration of God's mercy and the source for all our hope and joy. And so in this hymn, Peter keeps encouraging them with this message, reminding them that this hope is great, it's incredible. He reminds them that it is secure, it cannot fade away, and that it is true. Armed with that, in the next part of the hymn in verses 6 and 7, Peter immediately draws the link between the good news and their situation. So to encourage them that they can rejoice even in their suffering, because they know that it's only for a time, and that they can grow in faithfulness as they endure their suffering. And then Peter finally encourages us that we can rejoice because we can be certain of our salvation. And this is where Peter goes in verses 8 to 12. This has been the plan of God all along, he says, which is why God spoke through the prophets to tell us the good news of God's plan to save us. Thanks for joining in, and remember that we're sharing some study notes to go along with this, with opportunities for reflection and maybe even phone discussion or prayer with some friends. So if you want to receive this, please just shoot us a message on Facebook and we'll send it out to you. And you'll see me again next week. Bye.